Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Skelton, joined today with my colleague Brandon Bigelow, and this is the fourth installment of Seyfarth's Future of Automotive mini webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about distressed dealerships and the impact of COVID-19 on the dealerships and dealer networks. I think we have a pretty good agenda. Start off with really what's happening, what lies ahead for the auto industry and dealer networks and dealerships. Brandon's going to talk about the CARES Act and was that really a Band-Aid, just a Band-Aid or a long-term solution? And really there might be a silver lining here to the fact that we're going to see some distressed dealerships because there's an opportunity for some change in networks. And then we're going to finish up with some strategies for responding to the distressed dealer and in particular bankrupt dealers. So what lies ahead and really where are we? Well, first of all, COVID-19 is really the latest in the transformative events that have occurred, that all of which have led to network distress, dealer bankruptcies, and franchise bankruptcies in general. We had a real estate crash in the early 90s. We had 9/11. We then had the 2008 recession, which the Chrysler with the Chrysler and GM bankruptcies, and now we have, COVID-19, which has forced a number of shutdowns, and those shutdowns have, significantly affected dealerships, dealership operations, and really a shift to digital retailing. Mike Jackson on a podcast quoted was saying that 40% of the transactions have now been online in digital retailing. The NADA survey that came out recently, the vast majority, over 90% of dealers are going to be using digital retailing after COVID-19. And, what that has forced is dealers to be changing their model and how they're approaching things. And you can even see that, in terms of the workforce, they're going with fewer people internally and having more salespeople being online and doing digital stuff. And, that has had a change in how many units are delivering per person, all of which reflects that retailing has changed and is changing. And it's not just in the auto industry, it's across franchising in general. And what change means is that those who adapt, and will survive and flourish, and even flourish, and those who don't will really struggle. And we've seen that in the past, and we're likely to see that again. So what that means is that, as dealers reopening, there are changing consumer demands, and there are going to be significant financial challenges. There's fewer sales, less service, more costs, because dealers now have to deal with a lot of state and local reopening guidelines. They're required to put in reasonable measures to protect guests from potential infection. All of that compliance adds increased costs, and unless they're increasing their sales or changing their cost structure, that can affect the bottom line. The auto industry is having to now deal with the fact that consumers are going to be demanding new ways to access vehicle sales and service. They want a paperless experience. They want a blend of online and in-store experiences. Some don't want to come to the dealership, all want it totally online, want pickup and delivery. And, all of that is going to require a really significant focus on technology and making sure that the dealerships have that kind of technology and focus. The fact is that some are not prepared. Some will not be prepared for this new retailing environment. And when that happens, that, leads to distress. And it's not just COVID-19. There are other things that are going on in the industry that are affecting things. COVID-19 is going to have ancillary effects. We see it already in the rental car market. Hertz recently filed for bankruptcy, and they're undergoing significant changes. The electric vehicle industry, we got Tesla and Rivian challenging the way dealer networks are, and changing the way that traditional dealer distribution model is working and how they're bringing their products to market. And you still have autonomous vehicles and the competitive pressures they're facing. We have recent legislative and regulatory changes. The AB5 legislation, misclassification out in California, reflects the current kind of worker protection model, which is affecting the entire franchise industry. So bottom line, everyone, there's risk involved for everyone. And like other major events, we see that the financial distress for dealers is inevitable. And so the question is, and Brandon's going to talk about it, did the CARES Act, is it the savior or is it just a Band-Aid?
Thanks, John. It's a Band-Aid. It's that simple. The CARES Act was enacted back in April by Congress in response to the specific issues confronting dealers in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic. And to that extent, look, Congress did a nice job, right? The Paycheck Protection Program, which is administered by the Small Business Administration, makes loans available to dealers of up to $10 million. And actually, through a sort of creative carve-out, even dealership groups, large dealership groups like AutoNation, for example, can qualify for those loans based on by treating each of the dealerships independent of one another and treating them rather than as affiliates as independent businesses. But make no mistake, the Paycheck Protection Program is designed to encourage business owners to keep employees, idled employees even, on payroll. So the whole point of the Paycheck Protection Program and its very generous loan forgiveness terms is to encourage employers to not cut their employees loose and not let them put them onto unemployment, but rather to keep them on the payroll and have the payroll forgiven through loan forgiveness. The Federal Reserve also offering the Main Street Loan Program. Those are very attractive loans in the sense that they help small to medium-sized businesses get through the immediate crisis by making these loans available at very attractive interest rates with attractive repayment terms. Next slide, please, Jana. But make no mistake, these are all short-term solutions. Ultimately, the dealer who avails him or herself of the Paycheck Protection Program or the Main Street loan is taking on debt. And that debt does not address the larger impact of the systemic changes we're seeing. Dealers really need to be considering how they're going to address all these challenges. Dealers are independent small business owners. They have to make their own decisions about how many personnel they're going to keep on staff. The allocation of resources between brick and mortar and their online capability. What investment are they going to make in brick and mortar operations versus online sales? And dealers need to consider whether they want to go all in by purchasing a number of different dealerships so that they can diversify their portfolio and enjoy the economies of scale that come with owning multiple points, or whether they want to continue to be owners of just one business. The OEMs should anticipate that the dealers facing these challenges are going to do so with varying degrees of success and varying degrees of willingness to make the investments necessary. And given past experience, we should plan. There are going to be dealers who simply can't make the adjustment to what the future is. Those dealers are going to fail, and we need to make a plan. The industry needs to make a plan for how to deal with those failures. Now, that actually offers opportunities, just like any other crisis. Crises force business owners, manufacturers, and dealers to deal with the changing environment. John, I think you and I have talked in the past weeks, and we've observed that in the last 10 weeks, we've made changes that would have taken 10 years for the legal industry to adopt, and that's not any different. The dealers are being forced to confront right now issues that maybe they would have had the luxury of confronting over a longer stretch of time. Well, 2020 is the year that dealers are going to have to deal with a lot of changing consumer preferences. It may have taken more time for consumer preferences to change vis-a-vis brick and mortar versus online sales, for example. But at this point, you can anticipate that dealers are going to have to deal with those changes much more rapidly. Now, dealers who find themselves in financial distress really have three choices. They can close, they can reorganize through bankruptcy and have the opportunity to change their business practices and get out of whatever debt obligations they carried, or rearrange those debt obligations so that they can continue to operate, or they can sell their business. Obviously, closing is the least attractive option, unless the dealer has the opportunity to sell their real estate and simply get out of the business at a profit. But dealers, obviously, who decide to simply close their dealership are losing all of the blue sky value, the goodwill associated with that business. And you think about the multi-generational dealerships that are owned, it's hard to, well, breaking up is hard to do. Reorganization only works if that dealer has access to capital and a plan, and not everybody does. There are going to be opportunities. Ownership groups are going to see opportunities to expand and buy dealerships and consolidate their holdings in at least attractive markets. But look, if a market's not attractive, if a market is getting left behind, the dealer trying to sell their business in that market is going to have fewer options. Manufacturers are suppliers. Suppliers and licensors, they offer to sell vehicles to dealers, and they offer to let them license the name and sell under a particular brand name. But what manufacturers are not are insurers of risk. Manufacturers obviously have a lot of obligations under state dealer statutes. For example, manufacturers can't engage in the direct sale of vehicles in most states. Manufacturers can't own dealerships in most states. Manufacturers are prohibited from competing with their dealers in most states. Many dealer statutes even limit the ability of many statutes limit the ability of manufacturers to reject proposed buyers of assets. Although, you know, manufacturers do typically enjoy an ability to exercise a right of first refusal if they've negotiated for and obtained that right. Here's what manufacturers are not required to do. They're not required to prop up dealers who are failing because they're not those dealers lack the vision, the skill, or the willingness to make the necessary investments to keep their dealerships viable businesses. And manufacturers absolutely should be constantly evaluating all of their markets and making sure that they're identifying strategic opportunities. That is to say, determining how they're going to deal with particular competitive pressures and how they're going to take advantage of opportunities when a distressed dealer issue comes up. John, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you. And so in March, we published a comprehensive article on franchisor strategies, OEM strategies confronting dealer bankruptcies. There's a link in the slide deck. You will get a follow-up communication with a copy of the recording, a copy of the slide deck, and a link to that article. I would strongly urge you to review it because we try to address everything, and clearly I can't cover in the next couple minutes all of the strategies involved there. But what I can do is say that a distressed dealership should never come as a surprise. There are a bunch of telltale signs, including what the floor plan lender is doing, because the minute the floor plan lender, pulls the floor plan or is taking aggressive actions, more floor plan audits, you should pay attention because there's probably distress that's going on there. Everything that OEMs get a monthly operating report, which includes all sorts of relevant data, which should give the clues for those who are struggling. And early identification of those dealers that are at risk for financial distress is critical to strategic evaluation and strategic planning. First, you're going to probably need to do some analysis for that dealer, for that market. As Brandon said, we should be evaluating the strategic markets constantly. We may need to do increased audits, not just regular, with respect to warranty, sales incentive audits, because if there's financial distress, there may be underlying problems there. You may need, there may be default notices. The auto industry is somewhat unique, is that it operates on a dealer account, which is basically an open credit card back and forth, and you're going to want to pay attention to that and make sure that you're getting paid. With respect to bankruptcy, a highlight is the automatic stay changes everything. It is a game changer, and it is a trap, a significant trap for the uninformed. Basically, it prohibits any adverse actions, including NODs, NOTs, enforcement of operational standards or performance. Anything that could be deemed adverse is likely subject to the automatic stay, and you simply cannot do it without court permission. It also affects the otherwise routine operation of that dealer account, the ongoing reconciliation that happens either on a weekly, biweekly, or monthly basis. You can't set off post-petition credits against pre-petition debts and vice versa. And, if you violate the stay, even inadvertently or unwittingly, there are significant penalties and consequences. So the bottom line is there is no business as usual after a dealer files for bankruptcies, and OEMs really need to pay attention. And what they need even before that is a protocol. Everybody should have a protocol. We outline in detail in the article what you should be doing. But here are a couple key pointers. Number one, everybody within the organization needs to know if there's been a dealership bankruptcy, because you do not want some department taking some action because they don't realize this dealer's in bankruptcy and have that action be deemed a violation of the stay. I've seen it several times, inadvertent, unwitting, but still significant. And that goes mainly with the dealer account and the EFT transfers that may be taking place. Once a dealer files for bankruptcy, you can't be sending an EFT withdrawal notice to say, pay me for parts. COD and implementing COD and other kinds of situations are important. If you can do it, absolutely do it, because you want to make sure you get paid. You're going to want to have a process for how you reach out and engage the debtor, because early communication is going to be critical to developing a strategy. Nothing should come as a surprise. You should have an appearance on file. You should be monitoring the docket. There are clearly some stuff that you are going to want to pay attention to and not get caught off guard. We've identified a few of these things here. We discuss them in more detail in the article. The biggest point is, as Brandon said, distressed dealerships are an opportunity. You need to assess the viability of the dealer, the individual operator, that individual dealer, and its market. I think that there are two big questions that you should be asking yourself. A, is this individual dealer and dealership point worth saving? Because if so, there are things that you can be doing in the bankruptcy to assist a reorganization or a sale. And the second question is because, in my experience, the vast majority are related to a sale. Do you really care who it gets sold to? If you do, again, you need to pay attention and be involved. The last point is prepare for litigation. Bankrupt dealers, they're going to blame others. They're going to look to recover their losses. As Brandon said, when you have smaller multi-generational dealerships who now are wiped out and lose everything, they're not going to go away quietly. There will be claims, especially if they've been recently bought, recently established. They've spent a lot of money upgrading facilities. They're not qualifying for incentive programs. Those are all telltale signs that litigation is looming. So thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. Strongly urge you to, when you get the link, check out the article, because having a protocol is so important. Thank you again for joining us on our Future of Automotive series. We have a lot of information on their website. Thank you, everybody. Be safe.